I grew up hearing one rule over and over again. Never open the room at the end of the upstairs hall. Nobody ever explained why. And honestly, for most of my life, I never cared enough to ask. Then my grandfather died. Then my mother died. Then the house became mine. And that's when everything started to make sense. This happened a few years ago, and even now there are nights when I wake up thinking about it. Not because I don't understand what happened, because I understand just enough. The first thing I heard behind that door was my grandfather's voice. The problem was that he'd been dead for 12 years, and whatever was speaking knew a nickname nobody had called me since I was a child. My name is John Marin, and I grew up in Alexander City, Alabama. If you've never been there, it's the kind of place where family names matter. People remember who your grandparents were. They remember old arguments, old tragedies, and things that happened decades ago like they happened last week. The center of this story is an old house. Most people around town knew it as the Mistletoe Bough. White columns, wide porches, a beautiful historic home that looked perfectly normal during the day. At night, people avoided it. When I was growing up, nobody ever told me the full reason why. They didn't have to. Every family gathering eventually circled back to the same rule. Never go near the room at the end of the upstairs hall. Nobody explained what was inside. Nobody explained why my grandfather built it. And nobody ever explained why he kept the only key around his neck until the day he died. Looking back, I think everyone in my family knew more than they admitted. That's the thing about family secrets. People convince themselves they're protecting you. Sometimes they're really just postponing the moment when the truth becomes your problem. After my mother passed away, that truth became mine. I had been living in Birmingham for years, working a job I hated and trying not to think too much about home. Then the paperwork came. The house was mine. At first, I planned to spend a weekend cleaning it out, put it on the market, and move on with my life. I thought I was inheriting an old property. I had no idea I was inheriting a responsibility. The drive back to Alexander City felt strange. The closer I got to Lake Martin, the more memories came back. Old roads, old churches, places I hadn't thought about in years. There's something difficult to explain about growing up in a small southern town. People leave all the time, but some places never really let go of you. By the time I reached town, I was already feeling uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was guilt, or maybe some part of me already knew I was heading towards something my family had spent generations trying to hide. I stopped at Coaliga restaurant before going to the house. I told myself I was hungry. The truth is, I wasn't ready to see the place. That's where the first warning came, and that's where the story really begins. The waitress recognized my last name before I even ordered. "You're Earl Marin's grandson," she said. I nodded. Her expression changed immediately. For a few seconds, she just stared at me. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Don't sleep upstairs." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. That warning stayed with me long after I left Coaliga restaurant. The next morning, after finding those muddy, child-sized footprints leading to the locked room, I drove into town looking for answers. The Tallapoosa County Records Office sat in an aging brick building near downtown Alexander City. I spent hours digging through newspaper archives, property records, and missing person reports. At first, nothing stood out. Then, I started noticing the pattern. A teenage girl disappeared in 1979. A farmhand vanished in 1984. A visiting cousin went missing in 1991. Different people, different circumstances, but every case shared three details. A storm had occurred within 24 hours. Witnesses reported strange sounds coming from the Marin property, and each person had last been seen somewhere near the upstairs hallway. The deeper I dug, the stranger things became. Old handwritten notes mentioned voices, whispers, someone calling names from empty rooms. Then I found references to the land itself. Some locals believed a Civil War burial site once occupied the property. Others insisted older stories existed long before that. Warnings passed down through generations. legends about something beneath the ground. Nobody agreed on the details. Everybody agreed on one thing. The land had always been feared. Driving back to the house, I kept thinking about how fear survives longer than facts. Families hide things. Towns hide things. After enough years, nobody remembers the truth. Only the warning remains. And if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, kindly like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Now let's get back to the story. By the time I got home, dark storm clouds were gathering over Lake Martin. The house felt different. Watching, waiting. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard it. A whisper, coming from upstairs, coming from the locked room. My mother's voice, soft, weak. "Johnny, don't open it." My heart nearly stopped. My mother had been dead for 6 months. Then her voice suddenly changed. The whisper became a scream. "Help me, Johnny, please!" I stumbled backward. The entire house seemed to shake. Over the next hour, reality started unraveling. Portraits looked different every time I passed them. Faces shifted, expressions changed. And in one old family photograph, I noticed a man standing behind my relatives. A man I had never seen before. That was when I found the clipping. Maggie Moran, my aunt. The family always said she ran away to Atlanta at 16. The newspaper told a different story. Missing from Marin residence. Last seen inside the home. I stared at those words until sunset. Then headlights appeared outside. Travis stepped out of his truck, carrying a pistol in one hand and bolt cutters in the other. He looked terrified. Before I could ask a single question, he looked toward the upstairs hallway and said,
"There's something I should have told you years ago."
Travis stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked directly at me and said something that made my stomach drop. "The family lied, John. All of them." We sat in the dark living room while thunder rolled across Alexander City. Travis told me the truth, piece by piece. Maggie hadn't run away. Neither had the others. The missing relatives never left. They disappeared inside the house. A cold feeling settled over me. "What happened to them?" I asked. Travis stared toward the ceiling. Granddad believed something lived beneath this property. Lightning flashed outside. He said it only became active during severe storms. It could imitate voices, learn memories, pretend to be people you trusted. The room suddenly felt smaller. My grandfather knew. My mother knew. Everyone knew. All those years, they hadn't been protecting the family secret. They'd been protecting me from it. Then we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow impacts echoed from upstairs. Both of us froze. A second later, voices followed. "My grandfather! Johnny! My mother!"
"Please come upstairs." Then Maggie, the aunt I never met. "Help us." The voices overlapped, all calling my name from behind the locked steel door. Travis grabbed my arm. "Don't answer." As another storm slammed into the house, we searched for anything my grandfather might have left behind. That's when I noticed one of the portraits hanging crooked on the wall. Behind it was a hidden compartment. Inside sat an old leather ledger. My grandfather's handwriting filled every page. The deeper I read, the worse it became. The Marins had never truly owned this house. They had been assigned to it. Guardians, wardens. For generations, one member of the family remained behind to keep something contained beneath the property. Grandfather stayed. Maggie stayed. Then came the line that made my blood run cold. Your mother was chosen next, but she fled, which means the duty passes to her son, to me. The lights flickered, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Rain began dripping from the ceiling, not from a leak, from everywhere, as if the house itself were sweating. The upstairs hallway seemed longer than before, impossible longer, stretching into shadows that shouldn't have existed.
Then I reached the final page of the ledger. Written in shaking ink were 6 words. The room is not a prison, it is a door. At exactly midnight, a metallic crash exploded upstairs. Then another, and another. Chains hit the floor. Padlocks unlocked one by one. Travis raised his pistol. I couldn't move. At the end of the hallway, the steel door slowly creaked open by itself. A pale hand emerged from the darkness. Long fingers, gray skin. Then my grandfather's voice whispered from inside. "You took too long, boy." The pale hand gripped the edge of the doorway. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, the entire house shuddered. The walls began pulsing like living flesh. Portraits tilted on their own. Faces inside the frames seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Beneath my feet, the floorboards rose and sank, as if something enormous was crawling beneath the house itself. The nightmare had finally awakened. I stepped toward the doorway. Inside stood 3 figures. My grandfather, my Aunt Maggie, my mother. They weren't alive, but they weren't dead either. They simply stood there in the darkness, watching, waiting. My mother stepped forward first. Tears streamed down her face. "Johnny," she whispered, "don't let it wear me again." The words hit me like a punch. Then I understood. The missing people weren't gone. They were trapped, still conscious, still suffering, being used. Suddenly, a gunshot exploded beside me. I spun around. Travis stood there with the pistol raised, but something was wrong. His smile, his eyes, they weren't his. The thing laughed, and Travis's face began changing. First my grandfather, then Maggie, then my mother, then me. It wore us like masks, every face, every memory, every emotion. The real Travis wasn't standing beside me. He was trapped somewhere beyond that doorway. The creature spoke with 100 overlapping voices. "Choose!" The room stretched open into endless darkness.
Lock the door forever, and they remain with me. The trapped figures cried out. Open it fully, and they go free. The house shook violently. The creature smiled. And so do I. Chaos erupted. Screams echoed through the hallway. Portraits shattered. Windows burst inward. The ceiling cracked as the house began collapsing around us. I spotted my grandfather's iron key lying near the doorway. I grabbed it. The entity lunged. For one terrible second, I heard Travis screaming from the darkness. "John, help me!" I slammed the steel door shut. The impact shook the house. Then I forced the key into the final lock. Click. Everything stopped. Silence. Only rain remained. Police arrived hours later, after neighbors reported gunshots and the storm damage. They searched every room, found no bodies, no Travis, no evidence, only the sealed steel door. As officers prepared to leave, a faint voice drifted from behind it. "John, please open it!" Months passed. I tried selling the house. Nobody wanted it. I moved away carrying more guilt than grief. And if you loved this story, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and which part of the story hit you the hardest. We've got more powerful emotional stories coming your way. And trust me, you don't want to miss them. Last week, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was my grandfather's iron key and a folded note. The handwriting belonged to my mother. My hands shook as I read it. "John, the room is open again." I stared at the message for several seconds. Then I slowly looked up. That's when I noticed muddy child-sized footprints leading from my front door, straight toward my bedroom.